Hello and welcome to the Monday seminar. I am thrilled to be able to host again this week. We will follow our standard procedure. And that is, we'd ask people to mute themselves at the beginning, do what you want with your camera, leave it on if you'd like. Anne Socquet has very graciously organized talk and agreed to talk to us today. She's going to talk about this topic. I won't read the title, you can see it. The formal part of the announcement for the seminar is always done online. Feels to me like not worth repeating all those things that I wrote about Anne. She's done fabulous work for so many years. But if you have a point of clarification you'd like to ask, a little question during the talk, please just unmute and do it. I think it's easy enough. And then we'll have an extended discussion at the end. So, so real complicated questions of any sort, please save those until the end. So we allow Anne to have a train of thought. So thank you very much, Anne, for being here. And I will turn things over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chris. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for the invitation. So yeah, today I'm gonna talk about slow slip events in Japan, and trying mostly to look at, like trying to detect and characterize transient events that are beyond typical size and duration, so very small ones or very large ones or very long ones, and try to assess their potential link to earthquakes, and notably the Tohoku earthquake. And so another title for my talk could be A Tale of the Difficult Quest for Precursory Slow Slip Using GPS, as it's not necessarily obvious. So I will take the example of the Japanese subduction zone, and I will try to look at potential precursory slow slip, any other kind of slow slip, and more generally transient events. And this is a work that has been done with several co-authors that are listed here. And in particular, lots of these results are the results that were obtained by Lou Maril in the frame of her PhD that was co-advised with David Marsan. All right, so let's try to change slides. So, all right, so why the Japanese subduction zone? Because obviously the Tohoku earthquake was one of the most studied target to hunt for precursory signal, because of its size, and also because there was a lot of great amount of freely available data. So this is a reminder of this precursory slow slip that was seen in the seismicity data by Aitaro Kato and co-authors. So as you can see here in this plot, where you see the trench parallel distance as a function of time, the main earthquake is here. Here you have the large precursory event magnitude 7.3. And when you look at the seismicity, you see that there is quite a lot of seismicity preceding those events, and notably quite a lot of seismicity that seems to be migrating first. Then there is a quiescence, then there is the large foreshock, and then you can see a migration of the seismicity towards the epicenter, and this was interpreted as being driven by a slow slip event. And this slow slip event was actually detected using ocean bottom pressure gauges by Ito and collaborators. And here on those slides, you can see these records of ocean bottom pressure gauges, where you can see an anomaly that starts about 2 months before the earthquake, and that has been interpreted as being a slow slip event of magnitude 7, pretty close to the trench and pretty close to the epicenter of the Tohoku earthquake. Then there were other kinds of signals that were seen before the Tohoku earthquake, such as a drop in the foreshock high frequency content. So here you can see the residual frequency content once you correct from the propagation and the depth effect. And you can see that just before the Tohoku earthquake, you have a drop in high frequency content, while the high frequency content goes back to the normal during the aftershock sequence. And another observation was this observation of a 10-year transient slip preceding the Tohoku earthquake that was studied by several authors, Heiki and Mitsui, Yokota and Koketsu, as well as Mavromatis and collaborators. And so this was really like the first very long slow slip event that was detected before a large earthquake. So yeah, and then there were other kind of precursory phenomena that were inferred by GPS data. So this is a paper by John Bedford and collaborators that was published in 2020. And so in this paper, they infer the fact that the subduction is affected by a kind of wobble, like an east-west movement that lasted for a couple of months before the earthquake. And this was somehow related with a deep signal that might also have been seen using gravity anomaly during the months before Tohoku earthquakes. So all these precursory signals are discussed in some ways, and on the Japan Trench, there are also lots of observations, and notably seismic observations, that support the occurrence of slow slip events on the Japan Trench. And those seismic observations are swarm activities, the occurrence of repeaters, the occurrence of tremors, very low frequency earthquakes. And so one of the questions is, do we have slow slip events on this trench or not? So far, it has not really been seen with GPS. So during this talk, I will try to discuss some of these observations by revisiting the GPS data in Japan. So it seems that before Tohoku, maybe a complex range of processes occurred. And so I will try to show you if and how we can retrieve some of these observations by revisiting the GPS data in Japan. So I will start by discussing this large-scale east-west wobble before Tohoku. Did it exist or not? Then I will talk about the accelerating slow slip before Tohoku during the decade that preceded the Tohoku earthquake. And then I will discuss the potential occurrence of slow slip events in North Japan, including the pre-Tohoku slow slip events that were seen by the seismicity and the ocean bottom gauges. So let's start with this east-west wobble. So what are the observations that were made? In fact, what was seen was the fact that the whole Japan seems to have been moving east on an east-west direction before the earthquake. So you can see here in October it was not moving, then it's starting to move trenchward with an accelerated motion. Then you have a reversal. In November it moves backward and then trenchward again. And then, yeah, so it has been like moving for some time. And in fact, lots of the observations that have been made before the Tohoku earthquake have been using GPS solution, GPS time series that were provided at the time by the Japanese colleagues. So it was the F3 solution at the time. So now there are other solutions. And this solution was a solution that, that has been used to publish lots of very impactful papers. And so this solution, in fact, is not very well known because the paper that explains how this solution has been obtained is actually in Japanese. So, so when we started to look at that, it was a little bit difficult, of course, to understand. So you have those graphs here, and you have all this text in Japanese that is a bit difficult for foreign people to understand. But we were lucky at the time to have Yuji Ito in Easter, and of course, with Google Translate, you can obtain some kind of a translation and try to understand what is in this paper. And it was quite insightful because you have here a sketch of how the network has been constructed to make the reference frame for this solution. And interestingly, what they say in this paper is that for this solution, this solution is referenced to one single station, which is Tsukuba, as a fixed point. And so they explain in the paper how you can do a good reference for this F3 solution with respect to the ITRF. But of course, researchers who don't read the Japanese cannot understand this paper, and they don't know this work. And so they don't do the work of putting the solution in reference again. So this may lead to strong issues in the results, including what we call the common modes. So the common modes can lead to very strong errors, in particular when you do large-scale analysis of GPS data. And so what are the common modes? The common mode, it's the way you want to put your solution in reference with respect to the central part of the Earth. So obviously, when you have one point here, you position yourself with respect to the satellites. If your satellites are somehow, if the position of the satellite is not exactly well known, and if you do not put yourself in a good reference with respect to the central part of the Earth, then your whole network can move from one day to the other. And so you will have strong movements like this from one day to the other. And so in order to benchmark the previous studies, what we have done is that we have done a reprocessing of the GSI data in order to see if we obtain slightly different results. So we have done this reprocessing using two different softwares. So this software, which is called ChipSeX, which is a PPP, precise point positioning software, and another software, which is GAMIT-GLOBK, provided by MIT, which is a software where you position yourself in double difference. And in both cases, you have to do a good reference, and you can obtain a good reference frame. So once you have those time series, you can try to understand those time series and the signal that is in those time series. And so for each station, you have a time series. Associated with those time series, you will have, you know, like an initial position, an interseismic velocity. You can have some kind of long-term acceleration. You can have also seasonal variations that are associated with changes in the atmosphere or associated with the loading by the water table. You can have jumps that are due to changes in the antennas, GPS antennas, or you can also have co-seismic jumps, offsets due to earthquakes. You can have slow movements associated with slow slip events, or you can have post-seismic relaxation. So you can model those time series and try to see if you can reproduce the movement that is observed. And so now if we compare the solution that we can obtain, for example, with GEONET, with the solution that was delivered by the F3 solution without doing the work of putting yourself in reference. So you can do this trajectory modeling. So you can see that so you have all the stations here along the coast here, and you see the time series associated with all these stations. So obviously you see some co-seismic offsets, you see some post-seismic relaxation, etc. So all this can be modeled using a trajectory model here in red. And when you remove this trajectory model, you obtain some residuals. And what do we see? Is that we obtain a similar trajectory model, but when we look at the residual, we can see the intrinsic noise in the solution. And we see that the GEONET solution is really less noisy than the F3 solution. And we can also see that the F3 solution is affected by some long wavelength signals here. And notably, before Tohoku earthquake, we can see this signal that is moving back and forth. So it seems that this effort to put yourself into a given reference frame is very important. And when we compare what we have, so this is a figure from the Bedford and collaborator paper. And what they say is that they take a couple of stations, color-coded here. You see the time series, the east-west displacement time series. So they have removed all the trajectory model. And what they see is that at the end, before the Tohoku earthquake, you have this oscillation signal. But when you look here in the GEONET solution, you don't see this oscillation. So it seems that this wobble that was potentially seen before the Tohoku earthquake does not exist, and that it is an artifact from the fact that they have not done a proper referencing of the solution they used. So that's a first take-home message. In my opinion, there is no wobble, and I think that other people agree with this. Then, because we have seen that we can obtain very different results from previous studies, we decided to revisit this potential long-term acceleration that was seen before the Tohoku earthquake. So these are two figures from Yokoten Koketsu and Mavromatis. And so here you see the acceleration field that was measured using this same F3 solution. And you see that they see an acceleration landward in the north and a trenchward acceleration further south. And they model this as an accelerated creep at the base of the seismogenic zone below the Tohoku earthquake and a decelerated creep further north. So we wanted to investigate whether this is a signal that we can retrieve with our solution, or if it was also a potential artifact due to this lack of referencing when you use the raw F3 solution. So what we have done is that we used our own solution. We have done this trajectory model. So here you have a trajectory model that does not take into account any acceleration. So it's a linear trajectory model. So you see the time series in blue. You see the trajectory model in red. And here in the bottom, you see the residual with respect to the trajectory model. And what you see is that you have like a very large, long wavelength signal that could be associated with some kind of acceleration before Tohoku earthquake, that is at the end of the time series. So if we do a trajectory model that is quadratic now, that takes into account an acceleration term, then we can fit much better the time series. And when we look at the residual, we see that there is no long wavelength residual. So it seems that this long wavelength residual that we have here, when we have a linear trajectory model, can be explained by a long-term acceleration during the 13 years before Tohoku earthquake. So if we plot the velocity field and the acceleration field at all GPS stations in North Japan, here is what we obtain. So here we have the velocity field, which is the result of the interseismic loading before the earthquake. And here you have the acceleration field, which is much more noisy, obviously, because it's a second order signal. So what we see is that we find a similar result as previous studies, with landward movement here in the north and trenchward movement here below Tohoku earthquake. But we also see a significant acceleration further south here in the Kanto area, where a large earthquake is pending. So now if we look at the interseismic loading, so what we see is that we have a strong loading here where we had the Tohoku earthquake that occurred. Further north, we have an area that exhibits a low interseismic coupling. And further south, we have also a lower interseismic coupling. Close to the trench, we lack resolution. So we could have a different solution. So now, because the loading changes with time, we have a different velocity in 2097 and in 2011. We can see the evolution of the interseismic loading during these 14 years. So we see that the interseismic loading decreases in these 14 years. So you see that the loading here is high, while it's lower here in this area and at that time. Then we can look at the difference in loading between 1997 and 2011. And so we see that we have a decrease in interseismic loading in the southern part, while we have an increase in interseismic loading in the northern part. And obviously, this can be also shown as an accelerated slip. So here we see an acceleration of the slip rate in the area below Tohoku and also in the Kanto area, while we have a decreased slip, decreased creep in the northern part. So interestingly, if we compare those observations that are done with GPS with the seismicity, so here we see the acceleration of the background seismicity. So the idea is that we decluster the seismicity catalog, so we remove the effect of the main shock, aftershock sequences. And we look at the background seismicity, and we try to look whether there is an acceleration of the background seismicity rate or a deceleration of the background seismicity rate. And interestingly, we see that there is a deceleration of the background seismicity rate here in the north, where we see a decrease of the creep rate during the 14 years before Tohoku. And in the south, we have an accelerated background seismicity rate, where we have also an accelerated creep seen by the GPS. So it's pretty consistent between the observations from the seismicity and the observations from the GPS. And if we take an example here further south, here in the Boso Peninsula, for example, we can compare the acceleration in the seismicity that is shown here, and the acceleration that we can see from the GPS. So of course, the GPS in this area starts at the end of the 90s, and we see a similar acceleration. So it's pretty consistent between background seismicity and the creep that we infer from surface deformation. So if we try to wrap up those observations, so we have a deceleration here north of 39 degrees north. So from Heikki et al., they suggested that this might be related to the 1994 Sanriku earthquake, but it may not explain the acceleration up to 2011, while Heikki and Mitsui related this to the Tokachi earthquake that occurred in 2003. And in this case, it might be associated with viscoelastic relaxation, or it could also be associated with interactions between lateral earthquakes. So this is, of course, something that can be discussed. In this area, we also see an acceleration. So we confirm the acceleration that was seen previously by other authors. This acceleration might have contributed to the failure of the 2011 Tohoku earthquake. And finally, we find that there is a significant acceleration further south. This was not seen by previous studies, but it seems that it's pretty robust from our observations, both using the background seismicity and the GPS. And this acceleration field does not seem to be associated with the Tohoku earthquake rupture. So it remains to be explained, and it might be maybe a worrying signal for maybe a future earthquake in this area. Then I will switch to the third part of my talk, which is trying to find potential slow slip events in North Japan. So this is a figure by Nishikawa et al., where they try to wrap up the slow in green and fast in red earthquakes. So you can see that there are quite a lot of fast earthquakes that occurred. You see here the contours of the Tohoku earthquake, while in green you have the slow slip events that were seen in this area by Nishimura and collaborators. Here you see the slow slip events that were seen by Ito and collaborators using ocean bottom pressure gauges. And here in green, you can see tectonic tremors that were seen using the SNET network, which is the offshore seismic network in Japan. Also in this figure, you can see here, the red dots, that are in fact repeating earthquakes. So the repeating earthquakes are earthquakes that rupture repeatedly the same asperity. And the reason why they repeat the same asperity is because they are supposed to be loaded by creep surrounding the asperity that breaks on a repeated manner. So when you have repeating earthquakes, it means that you may have also slow slip events that load these asperities. So because we had those GPS data, we started to try to look at potential slow slip events in this area. And in order to do that, we have used a method that was developed initially by Baptiste Rousset and collaborators.
And
so
it's Chris, sorry to interrupt. Can you go back one slide and I missed the time period that we were looking at? Like these repeaters are occurring over what time period?
I think it's since the SNet was deployed. I know the repeaters. I think it's over a longer period. I don't remember. Sorry, it's not my figure, so, so I forgot. But I think it's probably a longer period. I think it's the I forgot the name, but yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
it
slipped out of my mind.
Thanks.
All right, so we tried to look at, I can find it for you afterwards. So we tried to investigate potential slow slip events using this geodetic match filter that was developed by Rousset and collaborators. So the principle is the following. So if you have if you know the GPS noise, so I will not go into detail about how we compute this noisy GPS time series, then you have the background noise within the GPS time series. Then you can put a signal associated with slow slip events, and you can construct a synthetic time series here where you have the background noise plus the slow slip events. And once you have this synthetic GPS time series, you can do a geodetic match filter, which is basically the correlation between the red signal and the blue signal. And then you can do a stack of this correlation, and you can obtain a high correlation when you have a slow slip event that has been hidden in the time series. So here you can see the time series of the correlation. So you see that when you have only noise, you have some kind of a fluctuation in the correlation time series. And when you have a slow slip event, you have a peak in the correlation. So then we can use this method and try to apply it to the real data to see if we have hidden slow slip events within the real data. But before doing that, we performed a lot of synthetic tests in order to assess, first of all, the magnitude and the duration of the slow slip events, and assess the detectability that we have for the given slow slip events. So once we detect the slow slip event, we have to assess the magnitude and the duration of this slow slip event. So in order to do that, we take the signal, which is represented by the dots, and then we fit within this signal a sigmoid shape that we have here. This sigmoid shape depends, the wavelength of this sigmoid depends on the duration of the slow slip events. and the amplitude of this sigmoid depends on the amount of deformation, which is linear to the amount of slip that occurs on the subduction interface. So using this fitting, we can obtain the duration and the slip. And since we have the slip, we can have the magnitude of the slow slip event. So before running this on the real data, we did some synthetic tests in order to assess what is the threshold magnitude that we can obtain on the subduction. And so here you have, you see the Philippine Sea plate, and here you see the Pacific plate. And the colors correspond to the threshold magnitude that we can retrieve in terms of slow slip event. And obviously, what you can see is that when you are close to the coast, you can have a threshold magnitude that is lower, of the order of 6.3, while when you are close to the trench, the threshold magnitude that you can retrieve is much higher, and it's larger than magnitude 7, because obviously, since you have only data on the coast, you cannot retrieve small slow slip events that are very far away. On the Philippine Sea plate, we have a threshold that is much lower, because here, so the trench is here, so it's dipping northward. So where we have a very good coverage and where the plate interface is quite shallow, we can expect to retrieve smaller slow slip events. While when you are farther from the coast, obviously the threshold is much larger. So the first thing that we tried to do was to see if the method was working to retrieve some well-known slow slip events, which are the slow slip events that occur offshore Boso Peninsula. So offshore Boso Peninsula, there are lots of large slow slip events that are very well described in the literature. And those slow slip events have a very large, a large magnitude. And so here it's the example of the 2018 slow slip event that, so where we see the time series, we see the slow slip event very well. So this is the stacked time series, so the signal over noise ratio is improved. And we see a secondary tail where it's going slower, and then you retrieve the background movement. When you look at the correlation here, you see that the correlation is small most of the time. When you have the very strong movement, you have a very high correlation. When you have a slower movement, you have a smaller correlation, and then you go back to the background noise. And then you can compare to the last panel here, which is the seismicity within a radius of 50 kilometers. And we look at the seismicity rate as a function of time. And we see that those large slow slip events are associated with a peak of seismicity rate during the slow slip event. So, okay, so we are happy, so we can retrieve things that are known already, so that's good. And then we try to run the geodetic match filter over a longer time period, and we can retrieve some other slow slip events. So we have been quite conservative. So we have used a correlation threshold that was quite high. Then we have also done a visual inspection of all the detection that we have. And we have also removed all the events that were associated with a large earthquakes, because obviously this would be a signal, a deformation signal that is associated with a large earthquake. And so here is another example of a small slow slip event that we could retrieve. So here it's a large slow slip event that was already very well known, the slow slip event of 2007, where we have a high correlation value. We see very well the signal, obviously, in the time series. There is a peak of seismicity that is associated with this slow slip event. But we see a second peak that reaches the threshold, and this peak of correlation here is associated with a tiny movement in the stacked time series, but it seems that it's pretty focused, and it seems that it's something that is really consistent. So when we obtain we obtain a duration of 14 days for this event, and it's a magnitude 5.7, so it's pretty small. Here on this time series, you see also indicated another potential slow slip event that was suggested by Gardonio and collaborators in 2018. So this is a newly detected slow slip event. So we find some other slow slip events. So this one, for example, is deeper. The trough is here. So here it's deeper. So when we look at the correlation, we see a peak of correlation here at the middle of the window. This corresponds to also a signal in the stacked time series, but there is no significant signal in the seismicity associated with those slow slip events. So if we do a summary of the slow slip events that we could retrieve, so here you have a plot where you have the latitude against time, and the bars correspond to the slow slip events that we could retrieve. The extent of the bar corresponds to somehow the uncertainty of location. So we can see that we retrieve the slow slip events that were known in Boso, that are marked by the blue bars. So we can retrieve this one. We can retrieve also this one. So we retrieve all of them. But in addition to those large slow slip events, we find a couple of additional small slow slip events. They have a smaller magnitude for most of them, except for the deeper ones that have a larger magnitude. So it seems that we have large, so here you have a plot where you see the magnitude as a function of time. So these are the well-known slow slip events in Boso that are associated with a clear signal in the seismicity, a peak in the seismicity. In this area, we find three additional small slow slip events that are in the shallow part of the Philippine Sea Plate. And but they are not associated with a strong signal in the seismicity. And in the deeper part of the Philippine Sea Plate, we find some additional slow slip events that are marked by the squares here. Voilà. So interestingly, we find with this method, we retrieve the known slow slip events. We find additional slow slip events that do not show systematic link with the seismicity. And we also find 4 additional slow slip events that are that seem to be deep on the Philippine Sea Plate, or maybe they are also on the Pacific Plate, because you have like the 2 plates that are on top of each other. So it's difficult to know on which plate it's occurring. Then, if we look at slow slip events, at potential slow slip events that occur on the Pacific plate, we find some slow slip events. So here we have an example of a slow slip event that is estimated with a magnitude 6.5. It occurred at the end of 2004, and the duration is estimated to 38 days. So you see that it's associated with a high peak of correlation signal in the stacked GPS, but no clear signal in the seismicity. So we have done that, and if we wrap up, we see that we find in total 9 slow slip events on the Pacific plate. So out of those 9 slow slip events, 7 of them are located in the northern part of the Pacific plate, north of the Tohoku rupture, and 2 of them are located further south. It seems that they are rather on the Pacific plate, but they also could be on the Philippine Sea plate. This is not very easy to discriminate. And so here you have in red, the Tohoku earthquake is represented. And in blue, here and here, you have represented the slow slip events that were seen by Ito and collaborators using the bottom sea pressure gauges. And they are located here. They are located pretty close to the trench. So it seems that we do not retrieve those slow slip events. So if we look in further details at the correlation in this area, at the time where Ito finds the slow slip events, we do not see a very clear signal. So here it's the time series. We do not see a clear signal. We do not see a peak of correlation. And at the time of the slow slip event, we don't have a very high peak of seismicity. And maybe the reason why we do not see those slow slip events, so there were 2 slow slip events. So one in 2008, so this is the one in 2008, and then another one in 2011. And probably the reason why we do not retrieve them is because they are located in an area where the detection threshold is very high, and probably we do not have the resolution to find them. So this is the example for the 2008 slow slip event, and this is the example for the 2011 slow slip event. So here you see that there is no clear signal in the seismicity. Here you have the large, you had the foreshock before Tohoku and also the main shock. So you have like some noise that is associated with those earthquakes. Because we cannot model perfectly the time series. But at least if we do not see those slow slip events, it's because probably the threshold of detection is too high. So if we try to wrap up what we saw with the slow slip events, so the first question that we could ask is, are those slow slip events occurring in the area where we see the large-scale acceleration before Tohoku? And in fact, we do not see any slow slip events in the area that has been accelerating before Tohoku. So we cannot really map the bursts associated with this acceleration. But instead, most of the slow slip events are located here in the north, and most of them are located in areas where you pass from a high locking to a lower locking. So it seems that the slow slip events seem to occur in areas where you have the transition between high and low locking. Interestingly, we have no slow slip events in the area that was ruptured by the Tohoku Oki earthquake, and this area was locked before the Tohoku Oki earthquake. So where we see the slow slip events, it's also an area that where we know that there was after slip following the Tohoku Oki earthquake here. So it seems that the location of the slow slip events we find is compatible with the known segmentation of the Japan Trench, but we do not have a very clear temporal pattern, probably because we are at the limit of detection. So if we try to wrap up, so we have benchmarked a couple of previous studies and tried to find slow slip events in North Japan. So we cannot confirm that there was a large-scale east-west wobble before Tohoku. We think that it's a problem of reference frame, most probably. But we do confirm that there was an accelerated slip before Tohoku. So in the area before Tohoku, it seems that in the area of Kanto, there was also an accelerated long-term acceleration, but we don't know if it's still going on right now because the signal is completely masked by the post-seismic of Tohoku. And we can also see this acceleration in the background seismicity. So we find slow slip events in North Japan using the geodetic match filter. We find 12 of them on the Philippine Sea plate, 8 of them are in the Boso area, and out of those 8 slow slip events that we detect, 5 of them were already known, and 4 of them seem to be deeper on the Philippine Sea plate, but we do not find any systematic link with the seismicity. And we do find slow slip events on the Pacific plate. Most of them are located north of the Tohoku asperity, but we failed retrieving the pre-Tohoku slow slip that was seen by Ito and collaborators. And the slow slip events are located in areas at the transition between high and low locking. And again, we don't see any clear temporal pattern or link with the seismicity. Okay, so I will stop here and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anne. Wow, that was really an interesting talk. I'll invite people to join me, unmute if you'd like. Thank you, Anne. Really interesting. Yeah, and okay, we'll give her a chance to catch her breath. At the bottom of your screen is a little raise hand button that looks like that. And the easiest way for us to proceed, according to me, is to have people raise your hand because then we'll be in order to ask some questions. And
sure. While
you're all thinking about it, I will ask my first question. I have several. Really a very interesting talk, and I like it. Can you go to slide about 20? I think it was about 20. It was where you were talking about acceleration. And just curious because it looked like there was a section of linear behavior that you just didn't model at first.
Can you repeat? Sorry, I was looking for my slide.
It's on about slide 20. You had numbers on some of your slides.
Is it this one or?
No, it's back before where you were talking about your model that started linear. Yeah, this model. Go one slide before this, I believe. Yeah, so I was curious about this period, the blue line and the red line, this period up until the year 2000. That blue curve, that the blue section looks linear. Why is it so poorly fit?
This one, you mean? Yeah. So in fact,
not necessarily the slip event, but the secular variation beforehand, all the way from the beginning of the plot up to.
Yeah. Okay, so the way we fit is that we first fit the single events here. So the offset associated